Welcome to the podcast. It's the worst territory in the world. Personalities, history, and other stories. We know you're craving for more knowledge. Let the champions get their glory. It's the worst territory in the world.
All right, everybody, welcome. It is the best time of the week to discuss maybe the worst territory in the world. I am Gabe, sitting here with Chris Goff. Chris, we've got one heck of a show lined up this week as we dive deeper into the NWL, and what better way to do it than with our special guest joining us on Zoom right now. Chris, why don't you tell us about your week and also introduce our special guests?
Well, yeah, I want to get right to the meat of the matter here. I mean, we have done several episodes on the NWL, which for those of you not privileged enough to go through the NWL's history of a year and a half, it was a great 18 months. And I mean, I'm saying it sarcastically, but I actually mean it. I loved it. But a lot of people, a lot of people remember it, but a lot of people either older or younger than me now may not have remembered it right now. So one of the guys that joined us during that time, Gabe, as you know, is a guy that wrestled for Metro Pro Wrestling and many other companies, but that's how I knew him. He wrestled for me in Metro Pro Wrestling, and I got to know him really well. There was like a carload of guys that would come over from Colorado, and this guy was always one of them. He's played a couple like little tricks on me coming from Colorado, but I still like him anyway. He goes by Hoodie Howlett. He's part of the Howlett's tag team now. He started the Howletts in NWL, and he's still kicking ass today. Hoodie, welcome.
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me. It's awesome to be on here.
I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, absolutely. The only man that's had the distinction of making me cry in the audience.
Wow.
When you had your match, and we'll get to that, it was like an NWL mini reunion at the Metro Pro show after we closed. Was your match with Haku. And that was a very, very emotional match because I saw how much it meant to you and how close we had become, and all of us had become in the NWL. So I was actually tearing up in the crowd. I was like, so proud of him.
That was a good night. It was a good night.
It was a really good night. But Hoodie, thank you so much for joining us. As Chris said, we're excited to have you on. Why don't you start from the beginning and tell us how, the NWL came a knocking and how you got introduced to the Kansas City wrestling scene?
Yeah, so I mean, kind of like Chris said, I started out wrestling for Metro Pro. I couldn't even tell you really the year, Chris. I mean, you might know.
You were there early. I mean, it had to have been somewhere between 2010, 2011, because that's when we started bringing in, there was a lot of guys. The other Paul Diamond, you, Tony Morales. There were several guys from Colorado. I mean, Josh Sipple, Josh FX, of course. I mean, Father Jack. There's a lot of dudes made up the Metro Pro roster from Colorado early on because Derek Stone was involved in that too, and a lot of those guys came over with him. But Hoodie, you can talk about how you got started in Kansas City, because before Metro Pro, had you spent any time here at all?
Not at all. I hadn't even been to Kansas City before Metro started, and Derek Stone was the one that invited me to come out and start wrestling for you guys. And I think maybe the first time I even came out, I don't even think I had a spot on the card, but I remember meeting you, and you were in comparison to everything that I had done in Colorado at the time, Metro Pro was just like insane how organized it was, and how good the talent was. And there were guys like Jeremy Wyatt and Michael Strider, Adam Pierce was on the show. It was just crazy to see the level of talent and the difference between where I was coming from to Metro. So it was always like, I always looked forward to those Metro bookings, especially back in those days. And once I got my feet wet with you, and I felt like you started to trust me more and more as we went on, because you always kind of gave me like microphone time, and you always kind of let me, run with like the little things I was trying to experiment with my character. And that was really helpful for me, especially in the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, Gabe, it was fun to like work with Hoodie early on because he was this fresh faced kid, just getting his beak wet. No, he would go out. Hoodie always was so great at no one in Kansas City knew who he was, of course, because he didn't have years. The Wyatts, the Striders, they had years of time here. But Hoodie comes in, and when you come from a situation like he did in Colorado, where no one would really know you are here, it's sort of hard to get over, heel or babyface, really, because most people don't have the charisma or just time under their belt to do that. But early on, it was pretty obvious that Hoodie could get on a microphone and be comedic but also be a heel, like not like stupid like I see on like one of the major companies now, but I mean like really still like have you hate him, but also like I sort of laugh at this guy, but I really hate him too. He did this thing. It was funny. Hoodie would always do this thing where he'd be like, "This is called a chin lock." He'd have a move on somebody or whatever. It was always something in the ring, and he would like tell the idiots in the crowd what he was doing because they were so stupid. You remember that, Hoodie?
Yeah. The whole thing that I started out with was I just wanted to be like a loudmouth from California. That was kind of the groundwork of my character, was just a loudmouth from California. So I came out with like the California flag, and I would talk a lot of trash about any place that wasn't California. That's where I started doing I would have the announcer say something like the superior city of Long Beach, California. And then, and then just as I kind of started to develop it, and keep in mind too, this was all stuff I was doing like only at Metro. Like I was really trying to develop a character and something that I could grab onto. And Chris was really good about like kind of encouraging me and giving me the opportunity to do some of these things. And I'd grab a headlock and I'd be like, "This is a submission hold. I learned this in Long Beach, California," and stuff like that. And it always popped Chris, so I figured it was working.
Oh yeah, he was sweet talking the promoter that way by doing that. Yeah. It was great. He'd always get like people hated him but also loved him. And there was this one promo he did. It was his idea to start, but it was about like how he hadn't lost a match in like 14. It was like he hasn't lost a match. And how long was it, Hoodie? And it was because he was comparing himself to the Undertaker because he hadn't been there in like a year or something.
Yeah, it was something like that. Yeah, I had like an undefeated streak because I hadn't actually wrestled in like a year and a half or something like that. So yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, he was always like, so it was obvious early on that Hoodie could wrestle and be good on the stick. It was good. It was great, and so it helped us.
Is this pre-Anaya, Hoodie?
Yeah, and actually, Anaya's first out-of-state booking was at Metro.
Wow.
Because I did the singles thing for a while, and then once I started tagging with him in Colorado, we established pretty early on that this was going to be like what we do from here on out. So I actually was able to bring Anaya out for a tag match at Metro, and that was his first out-of-state booking against the Commission, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The Commission, who I love, Hoodie, and a lot of people hated them, but I thought they were like, meaning in the, not a lot. A couple people really didn't like the Commission, and I thought it was a great gimmick with Matt Jackson. We had him on here, and we talked about that too. Sometimes you don't, I don't know, like, you look at things like Orange Cassidy now, and the Commission was actually a little bit more fleshed out than Orange Cassidy, in my opinion. They had a little bit more than one trick pony, but they were comedic to begin with. And like him and Evan did a great job with that. But there was a time there, Hoodie, where, whether it was in ring or on the mic or whatever, where we had a handful of tag teams, you and Anaya, the Commission, and a few others that were there that were like, we had a good tag division for like an indie at the time, which was hard to do. But Hoodie, I always thought you always brought so much to the table in the ring. And so when NWL came around, of course, and it was sad when Metro Pro was going away, but not so much to me because I found a guy that was going to pay me a salary to be in wrestling again. Yeah. I forget, like, I know I had to tell all the guys who were getting regular bookings in Kansas City, like, hey, this is sort of going away. But what was I don't remember my exact talk with you or how you found out. How'd you find out that Metro Pro is going away and this thing called the NWL with this guy named Major Baysden is coming around?
Yeah, I mean, you and I always kind of kept in touch, especially because I wanted to work at Metro. I mean, like you said, you had a great tag division, but you also just had like amazing wrestlers. That was the first time I saw ACH in person. It was the first time I saw a lot of these guys. So I would always call you, once a month or, once every couple of months and just be like, hey, like, is there any room or anything like that? And I do remember calling you and kind of asking about what shows you had booked for the year. And I remember you kind of being like, well, I can't really talk too much about it, but, Metro is going away, but, there might be some other opportunities that I'm definitely going to keep you in mind for. And yeah, I mean, I remember kind of being like, well, I guess that's the end of that, because it kind of felt like lip service a little bit, just because,
Sure.
You get when you hear something like that, it's like, well, I don't know what that means, but okay. And I had never even considered anything like the NWL starting up anyway, so that was the furthest thing from my mind when you were kind of talking about other opportunities. But I just figured maybe it was like another indie or another, kind of like once a month type show that you were going to be a part of. But really I feel like the serious conversation started when like you guys reached out to Dak. Dak Draper is another Colorado guy that obviously was heavily involved in NWL from the very beginning. So
Sure.
him being a good friend of mine, I remember him kind of telling me about the stuff that was going on. I think that's what really started the conversations about like, okay, like, how can we bring us in and how, what that would look like.
Yeah, I do want to go back real quick. The Regals, they were one of the tags that I don't want them getting hot at me because I didn't mention them. Or the KC Wolves were there too. We had some good young tag teams there.
Who is the
And,
KC Wolves, Goff?
KC Wolves was Graham Bell and Luke Langley.
Right. That's right.
So,
that's right. Okay.
And they were like very young too. I mean,
Very
Luke,
young,
yeah.
I don't ever see Graham anymore, but Luke has like gotten all ripped and he's all over the Midwest now. But yeah, we had a good tag division. But yes, I would agree with you, Hoodie. Like if I was hearing what you heard from me back then, I'd think like, oh, he just doesn't want me. He's an a-hole or whatever. Because like what. I didn't even know this thing was going to really happen. It was just weird, as we've gone over it before here, but it's just getting a call from a lawyer and then talking and some guy named Major. And then I talked with him and the whole way NWL started. It was just, I thought it was like a fantasy too. And in fact, like I kept telling this guy Major, hey, you probably shouldn't do this if you want to make money. And he can he proceeded forward, thank goodness. But yeah, so I understand why you felt that way. Now, Dak Draper, and why you're getting information from him, obviously, for those that don't know, is that Dak was one of the early guys that we were offering a full-time deal to, as far as just a full-time wrestler that was going to get the benefits and like the housing and all that stuff that we're here in Kansas City. Now, Dak, we'll have him on here at some point, but just in short, he was a guy that had some NXT experience, had some, more of a mainstream experience, which helped. And you could tell that Dak really wanted to, I think he was young and he'd probably call himself immature back in the NXT days. So this was like another chance for him to be like a top guy and something that was bigger than your local indie. And he obviously took the ball and ran with it. And I'm sure he told you about this, and you were probably like, Goff, what the hell? Because I hadn't said anything to you. I'm sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, the attitude was always kind of like, it was almost exactly what you said. Anytime I talked to you, you kind of were always like, hey, man, I don't even know if this is real at this point. Like that was kind of the early feedback I was getting back from you. But once you guys started talking to Dak, that's where it was kind of like, okay, this feels like it's like something that's real. And you didn't kayfabe me forever. I think at one point I just, we talked again and you were like, yeah, it looks like we're going to be able to bring in other people from, out of state. We'll have people that are in state that are part-timers. And that's how we came in to start with. We were part-timers.
Now, I forget, were you on the, did you get, there were so many guys, and I'm pretty sure you were in there from the beginning with all this, but we had the call where we would and I remember that we had the call, and who was on that call? It was me, and was Travis on that? Who was on that?
Yeah, Travis was on it too. And Was Major ever on any of the calls?
He was in and out of those. It was mainly me, Travis, and Major for Kansas City, and then Matt Jackson got involved more in the St. Louis crowd. But yeah, I was curious, how that went.
It could have been Major, honestly. I think for the majority it was me and it was you and Travis that like did most of the talking, but I distinctly remember there being a third person, so I feel like it probably was Major. But yeah, I mean, we were told, I believe you told me pretty early on that we were going to get to do like a totally new character. We, do something totally different. And that was like really exciting for me. And that was something that was, I mean, I had never really even considered changing my character or anything, but with everything that I had already done in Kansas City, with playing around with different things and kind of like messing with my character anyway, it was exciting to, maybe get to do something a little different. And I remember we came with the idea of being, we came with a few ideas. So the first major idea I remember having was, and no pun intended, was I wanted to be like basically a Mexican version of the Briscoes. I wanted to be like a cartel related, kind of like, grew up on a family farm type of characters that we were just like these like killers. And there was this element of, kind of like a cartel gangster thing, but also, very like backwoods type, DIY type of feel. I don't know.
Well, let's stop for a second, because one thing that you have in your favor is that you're racially ambiguous. Like, I don't really like Hoodie can be like, he could be Hispanic, he could be Samoan, he could be white. Like, so he was like, but it worked so well with like any angle we went with him, because he knew how to play it tough. He knew how to be funny, whatever. So,
and Anaya was a little bit different. Anaya was actually like, that guy's Hispanic.
Yeah.
Like for me, like he looks like completely Hispanic,
Right.
Yeah, he does. So you come with that idea, and like what you're describing, obviously, to those who hadn't listened to any of the shows before now, is that we had these conference calls that we would have with all the incoming wrestlers that we wanted to use, and basically have a conversation with them about what they wanted to be in the NWL as far as the gimmick, as far as their name, because as we said before, Major Baisden wanted to copyright all the intellectual property rights to characters and names, which I thought was on the indie level was a brand new cool idea, and it never really been done before to my knowledge. And but as Hoodie, that like some people hated that. Some people thought that was diminish their cred on the indie scene. It wasn't going to help them at all in other bookings. Because you were in that at the beginning, Hoodie. You were not a full timer. You were in the part time thing where you could have, the part timers had more of a thing where they were like, hey, like, why would I be, Joe Smith here when I'm, something else everywhere else? This hurts my bookings. But you never had that, because I think you saw the big picture, obviously.
Yeah, I did. And it honestly was just exciting. The whole thing was exciting. So, I guess I kind of understand the viewpoint of some of those people that didn't want to change their names and stuff. And granted, where I came from, Colorado is like an island amongst itself. Like it's hard to get bookings in other places when you're in Colorado. It really is.
You're far away from everywhere.
It's far from everything. Like, Utah is far, Kansas City is far. It's a trek. So, it really didn't matter if I was the Left Coast Gorillas and, in NWL. That didn't matter to me. So so when we were kind of pitching these characters, one of the frames of reference that I had for who we like aesthetically should look like are the cousins from the show Breaking Bad. And I remember when you're pitching like things to people, I don't know if it's just because people are like writing stuff down, but I remember there being like silence on the phone when we were kind of pitching like, just these different ideas and stuff, until I said the cousins from Breaking Bad. And I think it was Travis who like was like, oh my God, I love that show. And he knew the names of the cousins that are in Breaking Bad, which are Marco and Lionel, whatever it is. And so that's how we got those names, which I immediately knew that I wasn't going to be able to be Marco, that Anaya was he was going to call that one. So I got stuck with Lionel.
So,
Yeah.
so when you're talking about the difference between the Left Coast Gorillas, which is what you were wrestling in Colorado as, and then getting, this opportunity with the NWL and pitching these different ideas, was there going to be a difference in your mind between obviously just not just in name of Left Coast Gorillas to this new gimmick, but you also wanted, was there going to be an attitudinal switch between the two? Like, where you say, so the Left Coast Gorillas weren't killers, weren't anything like that, but there was definitely going to be that edge in the Howletts.
Yeah. So we were doing more almost like a comedy gimmick as the Left Coast Gorillas, not still like dangerous in a sense that we were competent wrestlers, but like our whole presentation was comedy. Like it was almost like a buddy comedy type of a tag team where Anaya was very like loose and kind of like silly, and I tried to play the straight man, and we argued all the time, but we had this element where we were brothers. So if you came for us, like, we were still going to fight you, but the whole gimmick was very comedy based, where the Howletts, the idea was that we were coming in as like stone cold like killers. That, at least in my mind, that's what I wanted to do. And yeah, I mean, we kind of got it sounded like, you guys liked the idea. I do remember we wanted to be brothers, but you guys already had the Regals, and then you had the Blood Brothers. So you guys had us be cousins. And so we ended up being cousins for NWL.
Hey, don't forget the Mancinis. They were also brothers.
Yes. The Mancinis.
There's a lot of brothers.
The King brothers.
So how did the name Howlett's come about? Yeah. I remember talking about Howlett, but I don't remember who. Did you throw that out?
Yeah, I happen to be, I'm kind of a comic book nerd, and I happen to be reading an origin comic book for Wolverine, the character Wolverine, and his last name is Howlett. And that was like, I feel like that was only, as like stupid as this is to say now, that was almost like kind of comic book nerd insider information at the time. It wasn't like you watch the Logan movie now and you know what his last name is. But back then it was kind of like a very subtle nod to like, our comic book nerdism.
Which is obviously very rampant in professional wrestling. So
right,
it's like it goes hand in hand.
Exactly.
Were you one of the lucky ones that got shiny new gear?
We got new gear. I wouldn't call it shiny.
Did you get Stagecoach boots?
We did not get Stagecoach boots.
Oh man, you missed out.
We did get. I will say this. Our gear was kind of like very standard. It was like blue and yellow, kind of like a navy blue, black and yellow, very generic looking. But we did get these awesome like leather jackets. Because I don't know where this part came from or where this element came from, but it was something that was thrown in a little later, I think. We decided, instead of us being like cartel members or something like that, like they ended up making us like a motorcycle gang, basically, like a motorcycle club, like Sons of Anarchy. Now, I've never been on a motorcycle in my life, and neither has Anaya. But we looked cool. The leather jackets with like our emblem on the back, and we had like vice president and president, and that was kind of like a key element to our gimmick, was we were like a motorcycle club.
Oh yeah, no, those jackets are very memorable, and those probably cost at least $1,000 each, knowing who was buying them at the time.
Right. Yeah, so we didn't get Stagecoach boots, which I'm a little mad about, because it's not like I can walk around with those jackets anymore. But
I talked to like Ace and all, we goof around all the time about like, oh, you didn't get those Stagecoach boots, man. Like all the people that came like a little bit later. I was like, for those who don't know, like the first group of people in the NWL, we had a budget to buy them gear and sort of like gimmicky stuff for them to walk out with if it fit their character. And like Stagecoach boots are one of the top boot makers in professional wrestling, and like most independent wrestlers don't have those. So
Yeah.
Right.
a lot of people were having some really nice gear, probably best gear they've ever had in their life, and that was all courtesy of NWL. So
Absolutely.
but so you start coming in, man, and you were on the do you remember that road schedule? What was your schedule? Because I mean, every time you're coming in and you're not living in Kansas City yet at the time, you are driving 9 hours each
Yeah.
way. So you came in for double shots, or what was your schedule like then?
It was every 2 weeks. I remember we were basically out in KC every 2 weeks. So we were there for every Kansas City show, because you guys were doing like one in Kansas City and one in St. Louis at this time, I believe. So we were there for every KC show. So we just hit the road every single every 2 weeks. And I think in the back of our minds, we just, that can be kind of rough, especially, when you got like other things going on outside. We're still wrestling for other places. We both still had like jobs, it was hard for us to hit the road every 2 weeks. But I think in the back of our minds, I remember the first time we came to NWL, it was like this crazy, presentation. There was this like video wall, and there was custom entrance music, and everybody like had these new gimmicks, and everybody, it was just like this amazing presentation. But I do remember feeling like I was a little lost in the shuffle of part-timers. Like there was a clear division, or at least in my mind, there was a clear like, okay, these are the top guys, and the rest of us are just kind of there, and we'll see who makes an impression, I guess. And I think in our mind, that was always what we wanted to do. We wanted to like stand out amongst the people that we were kind of with.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I mean, like we were just trying to we were just getting situated, and of course, whether it was right or wrong, the company's sort of mantra going forward was that you're building around the full timers, and sort
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
everyone else is going to be sort of accompanying them at first. But as time went on, and these guys try to get these guys over and try to get other people mixed in, it was going to change. But for those that didn't really look long term at it, they were probably sort of felt like it was going to be like they were going to be low card when they've been top of the card other places or whatever, which it wasn't an insult to anybody. It was just purely how the economics were playing out and what was going on with how he was putting this roster together with me or whatever.
Yeah. And
but
that didn't take long either. It's not like I was,
no.
I wasn't like on this like irrelevant, wave for too long. I think we had like a couple of matches, and then we started in with the stuff with the Regal twins, which was like, that was a pretty marquee position that we were in. So it didn't take long, but I just knew in the back of my mind that like, if I ever got an opportunity to do this full time, and I think I said this to you like several times, Goff, like when we were part timers, like if there's ever an opportunity at all, like I want to be a part of this, and I wanted to do it full time.
What was that? So you had worked with Rocky Mountain Pro was around at the time, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
I don't know if it still is, but
Yeah,
Vince Russo was writing for them at that time. So you had a taste of like quote unquote like potentials of wrestling shows because of his name and all this kind of stuff. What made it different for the NWL? What was the long-term vision that you saw, knowing that independent wrestling companies come and go? What was it about the NWL that you saw that was like, man, this could be around for a long period of time?
I think it really was that core group. Like when, I think it's really important anytime you're looking at like a wrestling company, like who are they investing in? Who are they really putting time into? When we started, it was Moonshine, or I'm sorry, it was Maverick, it was Dak Draper, it was Blaine Meeks, there was this core group of full timers, the Regal twins. There was this core group, and it was like, hey, these are all like young guys that are all talented, but they're all kind of like, they're still breaking through. You know what I mean? They're not like national household names or anything. And I think that was kind of important to me, was to see that like you guys were investing in like young talent, like, and it didn't really matter that they weren't bringing like a huge audience with them. It was like, okay, like we understand that we're going to have to build this ourselves, and we're going to do it with these young, like talented guys. So I think that was something that immediately struck me. And not to say, like Vince was kind of in Rocky Mountain Pro. Vince came in with the same mindset. I think he approaches all of his stuff with. He writes storylines, he gives them to people, and that's kind of it. Where I think at NWL is a little bit more collaborative than that. It felt a little bit, I got to basically make my own character. I got to do my own thing. I got handed kind of the keys to my own future. At NWL. It was like, hey, like we're gonna give you all of this opportunity. We're going to give you new gear. We're going to give you an entrance video. We're going to give you music. We're going to give you a character that you created. Like, here's the keys, man. What can you do with it? And it was kind of like, all right, like let's go.
Yeah, I mean, that to me, and that's how I was at Metro Pro too. That's I just always felt that the wrestlers are so much more engaged in it if they have say. And I understand that's not like I say that, and a lot of people like will bury Tony Khan for doing that all the time in AEW. But I think there's limits to it, of course. But you might have to go in with a direction. But hey, Howlett's, we want you to be this, but everything under the sun within the parameters of this direction you can do. And so that's and what I was going to say to what you were talking about earlier, Hoodie, is that yes, you did mention to me multiple times that you wanted to come on full time, but I looked at that as like you were super engaged and hungry and wanting to be involved in it, which I totally understood. And obviously, if I had, full-time jobs for everyone that I enjoyed in that company, Major would have gone down way quicker. No, it would have. My point being is like, if I could have given like, Wyatt had an opportunity, but he had another career already, and Strider already had another job. There's other people that, I mean, if it was a full-blown, huge company and Hoodie being one of those guys, and I just knew Hoodie better than Anaya at the time. But Hoodie was always super hungry about it, and I could tell he was like not angry, but he was like bummed in a good way that was going to help sort of get himself like hyped up to like work on it to become what he eventually got, which is a full-time job. But he wanted to be involved in that, and I feel like he had the the ammo that he needed to like actually get to where he was going, because he was so involved in it. And for a guy that was like hours away, and this Gabe and Hoodie knows this too, it's like you could easily tell who on that roster in the locker room wanted to be there and who was like, I am freaking all in. I mean, this is so cool. I mean, it was like a dividing line. More than half the staff was like, this is like unbelievable. I'm going to do this as long as I can. Great. I mean, you have Eddie Kingston coming in. You got all these guys thinking like, I might move to the Midwest to be a part of this, because that's how cool it was. But then you had other guys that I just call them small-minded. They just didn't really, I mean, they were just like wrapped up in their own stuff, and they really couldn't see the forest through the trees. So, I mean, that's what it was, really. Immaturity, whatever you want to call it.
Hoodie was part of your attraction to the NWL. Sorry to put Chris on the spot, but Hoodie, you're a very loyal guy. I mean, that's what I've gotten to know from you over these last few years. Was part of it Goff? Was it the fact that Goff ran such a tight ship in Metro Pro, and you knew he wouldn't let you down, and you kind of knew that he believed in you too, as far as a performer?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing about Goff, and one thing about Goff was he always kept it very real with me. Like at Metro or anywhere else, like he would always be like, hey man, like it's not worth your time to come down here for this amount of money. Yeah. And like for a promoter to tell you that, like that always like resonated with me. So like Goff was always a straight shooter with me, and he was always kind of he was brutally honest with me at all times. And so Goff? Yeah, that was
we're talking about Chris Goff being brutally honest.
Hey, I was I'm being real. Okay, yes. That's better.
If you don't know this about Chris Goff, he's brutally honest. But No, he'd always been like that with me. So I knew that, I knew that when the opportunity came up, it was a good opportunity. I knew that, I remember when like the full-time thing came along, like I remember we had a conversation then too, like, hey man, like I'm going to move myself down there. Like I'm leaving everything I know to like come down there. Like, and I don't think I would have been as trusting if it weren't for, Goff being there.
Yeah. Okay.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's how I was putting the roster together, is dudes that I trusted, because this is like a unique opportunity that I didn't want to put in the hands of a bunch of morons I didn't know. Like I wanted the morons I did know. But it was fun to have the guys around that made, I mean, really when Major started this, it was pretty simple. It's like, we're doing really well with Metro Pro. Like, I really thought it was going to be Metro Pro. We kept saying it's Metro Pro and steroids. We kept saying stuff like that. And that's what it was. I mean, if like we had a good roster and, most of them came over, and Hoodie was one of them. And it just, it worked out. And like, I'm really glad that he was able to start. And then let's talk about how you eventually got to the full time there, Hoodie, because you and Anaya, as you mentioned, the tag matches with the Regals and Howletts were, like, it was our version of TLC stuff. It was our version of Edge and Christian and the Hardys and the Dudleys. And like, we had multiple tag teams that were very good in this as well. But, the Regals and Howlett stood out. And, I still get messages from the Regal twins telling me how their body still hurts from everything they went through and everything, and there was tears shed and blood shed and all that stuff in your matches, which, I mean, to be honest with you, you guys were going above and beyond what I thought you should be doing, but you guys were so amped and were so into it that you did that. And, I don't know, I feel sort of guilty about some of that stuff, but you guys obviously are one of the most memorable things that happened during that run.
Yeah. I mean, for us, man, like we had never met the Regals prior to the NWL. Like I know that they had been a part of Metro, but we had never crossed paths. And it was just kind of one of those things. Like I think our first match at NWL was against the Union. And then I think like maybe we had one more match after that. And then not only were you guys like, hey, you guys are going to do this program with the Regals, like we saw it, both teams saw it. Like we'd be I remember tearing down the ring after a show, and we were just kind of talking to them, and there was just this instant like, hey, like we could really do something special with these guys, and everybody felt it. And so I remember when we were going into the program with them, it wasn't just like, okay, we're going to give you guys these matches. You guys were giving us like vignettes. We were doing like all kinds of, we like lit their gear on fire. I remember like we had a bunch of their merch and we like lit their merch on fire.
That was fun.
And then there was like another one where we like chained one of them up. Like they came out for their matches and only one of the twins was out there, and we had the other one like chained up to a wall backstage, and we just did all this really cool stuff. So that's the stuff that I'm like in pro wrestling for. I'm not a like, hey, I'm going to go out here and do like all these moves. Like I'm invested in the story. So it was really exciting to be able to not only tell a story, but also tell the story with a backing of NWL that had this money that could actually like invest money and time into telling a cool story. And I think that that's why those matches hold up, is because we did a lot of crazy stuff, but I don't know that we would have done all that if it weren't for all of us just believing in the story and believing in what we were doing. And it like, kind of sealed our friendship forever. Like we're still really good friends with those dudes, and it's because of those matches that we had. It was a great time.
There was a bunch of storylines that I think what set NWL apart, and Hoodie, I think you probably agree with me, is that there was a bunch of storylines going on that were really, really super interesting, that had these arcs and these ebbs and these flows. You had one of the storylines at the time was Thor Terrio and Michael Strider, you guys in the Regals, Jack Foster doing like, is he one side, is he the other? And I looked at you guys, and I think me and you talked about this. I think that had the NWL survived, the Regal twins and the Howletts would have been one of those stories we could have always gone back to the well for, because there was that innate chemistry between the two teams. And it's funny because you guys are such a juxtaposition over each other. So tell me what in your mind was like the linchpin or something that really held that feud together? Was it the in-ring chemistry? Was it the promos that you were able to cut on those guys? What was it about that feud?
I don't know that there's like one thing. I think it was kind of right time, right place. I think we were all just kind of
Hungry.
We were all hungry, and we were all in this like moment of, hey, like we're in this new company, and they were full timers, but they still showed us like the respect of like, hey, like we can really like tell a good story with these guys. They never had any kind of elitism with us or anything like that. It was really just like a collaborative effort. And then once we got in the ring that first time, it was like, oh, like this is definitely going to work. You can have all that story and all that stuff, but if you get in the ring with somebody and you just don't gel with them at all, it's gonna stop pretty quickly. But we were so excited after that first match. I remember we all were in the back just like, having like a follow that moment. We really, the four of us were in the back just like very hyped about what we just did. And we realized that like this was something that we were going to be able to like ride with for a long time. And we ended up doing it. And it was just, I really don't want to use the cliche of like magic or whatever, but like it really felt just right. Everything just fell into place.
Yeah, it was, and it's one of the most memorable things that will ever be in the NWL, obviously at this point. But if anyone has a chance out there on YouTube, what is it, NWLX, Gabe? Is that it?
Yeah, the channel name is NWLX.
It's the Hoodies versus Royal Blood, and they had multiple matches, and they're all very good. So Hoodie, when we talked to you about obviously part time and went through the whole rigmarole of joining the company, but what tell me what you remember about being offered a job to join the staff, because you had some chops. I don't know how at the time, I don't necessarily know if you had a lot of experience, but you had some experience video editing, and you were more interested in at that point you were you were willing to do whatever and learn whatever. You probably lied and just had like some kind of like cheap version of Premiere on your computer, and you're just like, I need to learn a couple things. No, but you join, and not only are you going to be a full-time member of the company, but you're going to be a wrestler and a guy that works backstage with, online stuff, helping with vignettes, helping with video editing, all of that stuff. How did that come about? Tell me your story from that side.
Yeah, I remember just being in your ear all the time. Like, if there's an opportunity, please let me know. If there's an opportunity, please let me know. And I do remember, I don't know if this had anything to do with it, but I remember when we were going to debut for NWL, I had this idea of like filming a vignette in Colorado and editing it and just sending it to you guys so you guys could use it on TV or whatever you were going to do. But yeah, I had some experience editing. I went to school for post-production. And then I was working in a hospital for like a really long time, just doing like advertising, stuff like that. So yeah, I had some experience with like video editing, and I think Major was the one that I think we set up a call with Major because you knew that I had some experience with video editing. I did like a little test run that ended up getting sent to Josh Leo. He approved it or whatever, and then
Thank God.
and then I talked to Major, and yeah, to be honest, like I remember being very nervous about whether or not I was going to be able to do this, because it sounded like what you guys needed was like, editing the actual wrestling shows. My first impression of what my job was going to be was editing St. Louis wrestling TV, editing vignettes, doing like entrance videos, all that kind of stuff. So I was definitely nervous because it was outside the realm of anything that I had really done before. But like you said, I was going to learn. So I sent off, I think I edited a match and I sent that off, and then maybe I did something else like a reel or something, and ended up talking to Major, and he said, hey, yeah, this is good. Can you be out here in a month? And yeah, I packed up my stuff and moved to Kansas City.
And like every wrestler I've ever met, they can fit everything they have in their car and go anywhere they want at any time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, hey, you're sitting there describing like your job, like going through the process of like your demo reel and like having to send it in and stuff. I mean, what's your impression of like coming to this company and like you have it's like daily meetings. It's like a corporation with a bunch of independent wrestling people, and me and Travis Bowden and Matt Jackson, and here's Gabe and like Marty. It's like a circus and like a corporate environment. It's funny, right?
Dude, it could not have been any different than it couldn't have been any like more strange to me. Like it was just so, it was like stepping into a different world or a different like universe almost. Like it was insane because it was like the even the like level of professionalism that like Rocky Mountain Pro had, I would say was above like a lot of other indies. But this was like, dude, you guys had like a downtown office. I remember I came the weekend before. I started on a Monday, and so I like moved all my stuff on like Friday so I could spend the weekend just getting to know Kansas City and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I remember we stopped by the office on like that Saturday or something, and Major was there. And I like walked through the office in this downtown building. It's like, I know it wasn't, but it like in my mind, it was at the top floor. You know what I mean? Like
sure. It was pretty close.
The elevator doors open and there's just like this crazy view and like, glass walls, and just, it was just like, what in the hell what is happening right now?
It was like you're walking into like a modern architect company or something.
It was wild, man. It was just, and just Major being like a legit like businessman, and he has this like aura of him, like oh, you really are like a very important person. Like it wasn't just like a fat guy, in a shirt that was like 3 times too small for him, like smoking by a ring. It was like, oh, this dude is a legitimate like businessman. You know what I mean? It was just completely different from anything I had experienced before.
I agree. I mean, the level, I mean, even like, I had been to WWF. And so obviously that's the height of like professionalism in wrestling, because it's like that thing is just fleshed out to such a corporate degree that it's amazing. But to say that Major and the NWL on the indie level was like a mini WWE is not far off from the way that he was running it. And I'm always amazed when I tell stories about the NWL. I'm like, man, he ran this like it was a Fortune 500 company, and he had all intentions of it becoming one. He knew he was going to go into the red the first year or so. He knew he was going to lose money going into it, but he had, I mean, like I said before, I told him a million times, like, dude, indie wrestling is not what you're going to make money in. You should not do this. I'm just being honest. I know you can give me a salary and I could lie to you, but I'm brutally honest. I'm just telling you, this is not where you want to put your money. But he just like smiled and, did his vape and moved on and went down the road and did everything he did. And yeah, he was, I mean, sure. Looking back, I mean, there were some luxurious things that probably we shouldn't have had. Like he had the TPC, we had a performance center a few miles away, whatever, by 5 miles by air maybe, and then the downtown building. And I was like, I mean, one day I had to take a rent check over, and I won't say how much it was, but I was like, he said, hey man, this is due today or whatever. I'm like, good Lord. And what do you pay? And what's the other building? This is just for both buildings, right? Oh, it's just one. And it was just amazing.
Was it for the TPC golf?
No, this one was for the actual.
Okay, because I know how much the TPC costs, and that was a lot of money.
No, they were comparable. Yeah. They were the same, basically.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if you can imagine like parking. Okay, so like my life as a pro wrestler up to this point is grabbing my little wheelie bag, putting on a pair of basketball shorts and like a dirty t-shirt, and showing up to a venue that like probably has like dirt and horse manure and whatever. It's like a basketball gym or whatever it is, and like you wrestle, you get handed an envelope, you get back in your car, you drive another 9 hours. Like, contrast that with like parking in a private like parking lot, walking across the street. You're like walking into a building with like definitely like businessmen, people that own companies, and getting in an elevator and going upstairs. You got like, I'm wearing like khaki. I remember on my first day I like dressed up because like, what, why
We
wouldn't
all
I?
did.
Yeah,
I dressed.
yeah.
I mean, that sort of got lax later, but Major was big on dressing up. He was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I wore like slacks and like tucked in my shirt. I don't know if I wore a tie or not, but I definitely dressed up, and it was just such a it's crazy to even think about now, the complete contrast between what wrestling was to me up to this point and what it became. And yeah, I mean, it's just crazy.
Chris, was Hoodie the first hire that was wrestler and office at the same time, outside of like Derek Stone and all that kind of stuff? Was he the like the first like kickoff? Was he before Thor?
I think I was like right after Thor.
Okay.
It was like, so, the four people that I can say sort of went into that category that were wrestler and worker, because obviously Marty was full-time and she ended up wrestling later, Marty Bell.
Yeah.
And then Thor came on as a graphics designer because Brian Burke had been there, and Brian Burke started the company, and he did fine, like from the beginning. He had no experience in wrestling. I mean, look, I have a lot of sympathy for people that come off the street or any other company and try to like be thrown into pro wrestling and know what the hell you're doing running. I mean, it's like it's just so different. You're dealing with like a whole group of subset of people and like situations that they've never dealt with in any other tech company Major may have been involved in. So I get that, but I also so Thor came on because he had a little bit more wrestling mind for design, and he did both. And then Hoodie came on and did the video editing and wrestle. And then Jake Durden did some video editing later too, and he was a full timer as well. So those four actually, they sort of the hybrid position people. You both sort of saw it from different perspectives as this company continued on. Some of the early people that were in the office, and it just reminds me, going back to when Major said, we're going to start a goal right now. We're going to have a vision what we want to do, and like 6 months from now we'll figure out how we're actually making money, and we'll go down that route, and it's going to change everything we have for a goal for the next 5 years. So I'm just letting you know that's how it's going to work. I'm like, okay. And that's basically what happened. I mean, we sort of cleaned house with half the staff that was in the office, and got rearranged. And then it became like, he still was on board with wanting to make money, but he wanted to get people like Hoodie who could come on and actually do multiple jobs and not just one job, and it reminds me of how ECW was. You hear the old stories of like, Bubba Ray Dudley's putting up posters and taking calls and booking events and, getting venues and blah, blah, blah. And that's sort of what we became at that point.
Yeah, and I think that's probably what makes it so unique, even with a guy like Dak Draper, who, has been signed to, at this point, like a lot of different wrestling companies. I think it's been his only job up to this point is wrestling. So,
yeah.
But I think that's what makes it unique, is that there was this element of, kind of like you said, Chris, like a mini WWE professionalism, but also this very like, grassroots, like we need to build this ourselves type of mentality, which was very unique.
And it turned into that as we went on. Obviously that wasn't exactly how it was when we first started. Sure. There was a lot of people working there that were helping get it off the ground, but as the thing grew, obviously it went in a different direction. But what were some of your memories before we get to the eventual saying bye-bye of the company? what was your what are some of your favorite memories of NWL working there? I mean, the wrestling stuff is, you can compare a lot of times to other companies you've been in for whatever. But what was some of your favorite things or things you remember about the office?
Yeah,
I was gonna say, brother.
I could say, I mean, I could talk forever about like the year that I spent there. I mean, it was just so much fun, but it was a lot of fun for me because I got to be a wrestler and I got to be like a member of the, I don't know, corporate team or whatever you want to call it. Sure. I got to, I got to have this camaraderie with literally everybody that worked in the company. And it was fun to be able to mesh those two things together. Like, I think I brought an energy into the office that I think only a wrestler could bring into the office. Marty obviously was there too, but I think her and I like played off of each other a lot. And then Thor came in, so it was just such a good time. We had so much fun. I was constantly tormenting Josh Leo. We just had a lot of fun. It didn't feel like going to work, and that was the best part about being at NWL. It was like, I can't believe I'm getting paid to do this. Even if you took the wrestling out of it, like just getting to go to the office and, edit wrestling all day long, and hearing Chris Goff come in and talk about something that pissed him off on Monday night.
Hell yeah. The 9 a.m. promo, dude.
Oh, the 9 a.m. promo was amazing. It was just all of that was amazing. And then, to sprinkle on top of that, like, I really developed as a pro wrestler during that time. If you go back to when we were just trying to kind of like make a name for ourselves, so to speak, in that match against the Union, in our minds, we were like, we can like make an impact here. And, you fast forward to these like landmarks, like getting to wrestle Jimmy Jacobs, when really, like, you guys didn't. If you go back and kind of look at the timeline of everything and like where I was on the card and all that, you guys didn't need to give me that match, but I felt like you gave it to me as an opportunity, and I capitalized on the opportunity. Same thing with Eddie Kingston, and just all these little moments that I got really helped me develop as a wrestler as well. So my time in NWL, anybody that's been a part of it, we all say the same thing. It's just something that like we'll never forget. And it's because I loved my time there. Like, it was the best. I mean, it was the best thing that had happened to me up to that point. And honestly, everything that's come after in my life now, like the way I'm living my life, my job, my wrestling career, all that stuff, I owe it to my time at NWL. And that's not me just saying that. That's real. I really do.
Mean, you moved here, you live here now. You've had a cool job with Tech9 for a while. Now you're doing more video editing. It's like, like, I will let you know, I still cut a promo every day. My wife doesn't like it as much as the wrestlers because she gets sick of it. But one thing that made me laugh when you were talking about that is dude, Michael Strider, who we all know and love, who you work for now at Central States Wrestling here in Kansas City. Yes. His dream job was working at the NWL. I mean, it doesn't matter what else he does in life. He loved the NWL for the same reason you said. He got to work in wrestling full time, and he never thought he was going to have the opportunity. And I never thought I was going to have the opportunity again. And it was amazing I did. But when it was down, like it just crushed his balloon. He was so devastated when it went away, and he just looks at that with the same kind of thought that you do, which was, I can't believe I'm getting paid to do this, and that's how everyone felt there. I mean, it was people don't really, like creative environments like that. I've really been able to have several of those. And each time it's like you say, we were all, I mean, I really wasn't that young, I guess, but we were like, when I first started, I had it in TV, I had it in wrestling too at WWF. And then it's like the camaraderie in a creative environment like that, because you don't have like a stuffy cubicle situation. You have the best creative is sort of like, talking to each other, screwing with each other, talking things out, like giving shit to each other. I mean, this is what makes the creative stuff work to me. And that's why it was like always a collaborative effort with all this. And because, no one is smart, whether it's Vince Russo, Brian Gewirtz, any of these people, no one can do it by themselves. They can't, because there's too much, there's not, and no one's that good, like Brian Gewirtz I always think of him. He was at WWF for so long in the writing team. And I was like, Brian is extremely smart and extremely creative, but dude, he was there for, I don't know, over a decade, pumping out hours of content. I mean, you can't do that by yourself.
Right.
And that's how our place there with Gabe was doing social media stuff and doing the play-by-play, and you doing what you did. Yeah, we had so many, like, that environment, like you said. The video pops up with you and Marty dancing to whatever, that Michael Jackson or whatever that was. I forget what it was. Like, that video pops up all the time, and it makes me smile all the time because it takes me back to that moment, because like that crap was happening on the daily. So
dude, it just I think also too, Hoodie, and you can probably echo this sentiment. When we started paring down a lot, and there was that core group of people that went down with the ship towards the end, that bond was a lot different than the bond that was formed like when people were first coming in, because it was like everybody, like, I remember you calling Thor over, or all of us, and saying, "Hey guys, what do you think of this edit?" Boom, 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 boom. And we became like this, like you said, we were all going to survive or we were all going to die. And it was on each other's backs. It was like, oh yeah, let's have this fun game show. Hey, what do you guys think about this? And all this it was like this super collaborative effort that I think like really bonded us even tighter, than if it had just been the normal thing that you had first come into. And, one of the great joys for me, being like on that production side, so to speak, or TV side, was seeing the evolution of your promos, because I knew you were special, because when I first saw you cut a promo at the NWL, I was like, this guy is different, because you could have totally, and you didn't, but you could have totally gone in the ring and crapped the bed. But those promos that you were cutting, I could tell that you wanted whatever was happening to be, to be full-time, to be all this. You were so passionate about the NWL and wanting to create something different. And I think that just really translated to the office. And you brought that fun and everything. So it was, I don't know, like, me and you haven't seen eye to eye and everything in the years following NWL. But the one thing I've always admired about you is how passionate you are about being a professional wrestler, and the bonds that we all created in the office. So I mean, it was the funnest time of my life. I'll never have another job like that.
Yeah, it really was. And you mentioned like the promos, and I mentioned like how much I developed as a wrestler and how much I developed as an editor and all that stuff. All of that stuff really can just be accredited to the fact that like everybody was trying to do their best. Like when you're really in a situation where there is no other option, like there's nobody that can just like slack off and ride the successes of all the people around them, which is how many jobs are like that, where there's always that one guy that doesn't really do anything, but he gets by because everybody else is carrying
every
their weight.
Corporate job. Yes.
Yeah, we didn't have those people. Like if you were one of those people, you were gone. So it was like everybody around us was performing to their highest level, whether it was in the ring or backstage, doing interviews, editing, like any of that stuff. It was like we all have to step up, and that's really all I ever wanted, was the opportunity to like do that, to be a part of something like that. I do have to say, one of my best takeaways from, I don't even know if I can get into the specifics of this story, but like one of my best takeaways is that Chris Goff needs a reality show where he's put in very high emotional situations just so you can see how not emotional he can be. It's one of my favorite things about working with Chris Goff is there's always been, of course it's pro wrestling and it's a startup, so there's drama everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
But Chris Goff is the king of walking into a very highly volatile, highly emotional situation and reacting the most deadpan as humanly possible, and it's just one of my favorite things about you, Chris.
That's that is a survival tactic of just being a dick. And like, if I really want to piss somebody off that's being a jerk, and I know who you're referring to, and I know what this is about, because there's one key example where that happened, and it was because, as always, that guy was completely freaking over exaggerating something that he did on the daily too. So like, I just. Yes, there's things that happen in a thing there that when I've learned through life that if you just chill out and don't freak out at every little thing, like indigestion, you'll live. And I don't need to really say anything. But let's just say to people that don't know what's going on, we had a slight possible medical emergency in the office one day, and it really wasn't. It was like I don't know, like lightheadedness for a few seconds.
My jaw hurts so bad, dude.
Goff was told to call 911, and Goff's reaction was, "You want me to call 911?" That's where we can leave it. It was
people
hilarious.
Don't understand that we're on the 5th floor or whatever of a freaking building downtown. So if you call 911, you understand what kind of red tape this is going to be involved in. You better make sure you're dying.
Dude,
and
the way you were, like Hoodie has said, you were so like deadpan and almost like non-reactive that it was.
It's my favorite thing about you, Goff. And it wasn't just that one time. There were several instances where you were just like, it would be so easy for like an emotional person to fall into the situation, and you were just always just like, what are you doing? Like it was my favorite part of
you have as you know, you were around that situation, and you've been around indie wrestlers, and you're older now, because I was older than all you guys. So it's like when you're in that situation and you grow up, you realize usually when people freak out, it's really not for any good reason. It's like over emotional people, and like you have to have someone there to be like not freaking out, and that was what I brought to the table. So anyway, there was a lot of, and especially in wrestling. I mean, come on, at any level of wrestling, especially independence, there is a lot of there's a lot of drama caused for absolutely no reason. And that's one thing that I am so glad I'm not around now, because there was just the backfighting and the freaking jealousy and all this other stuff that went on, and that kind of stuff. And we had very little of that. Not with any of the full timers. That's just something that happens in general in wrestling.
Right.
But
Hoodie, I was going to ask you too. What do you think of the St. Louis thing? So when you came on board, St. Louis was being closed that day. I think you were remarking before we came on. Did you see a difference as a wrestler between the St. Louis boys and the Kansas City boys?
I mean, not really. I was very unfamiliar with everybody in St. Louis. The only real interaction that I had had with anybody at St. Louis was like the commission, and maybe a couple of other guys, but I didn't really know anybody from St. Louis. So I remember trying to get familiar with the product in the weeks leading up to me moving there, so I could kind of get an idea of what was going on. And so yeah, I remember guys like Mike Outlaw stuck out. Obviously, like Letterman stuck out. There was a couple other people, but the day I moved to Kansas City was not the day I moved, but the day I started with the company was the day that St. Louis closed. And so, like, keep in mind, I have this already idea of how flimsy pro wrestling can be. I just moved all of my, not a ton of stuff, because like you said, Chris, it all fit in my car, but I moved my life to Kansas City, and then I'm walking into the building for the first time and I find out that St. Louis just closed. So that was scary, but it ended up working out. So you lived that. You both lived like the major based in corporate like swings. There were some major things that happened, no pun intended again, that there's like things happening, like people are out of the office, Travis Bowden's like let go, like half the staff's gone, like we're no longer going St. Louis. Major posted something about St. Louis that was derogatory, like stuff that you had to like go through. I thought what'd you think about some of the venues? Like I thought the venues themselves were like the first ones, like Scottish Rite and Casa Loma, awesome to me, like internally, But of course, one thing that I always sort of disagreed with was going downtown downtown urban more than suburbia, because that's just the demographics of the wrestling fan are more suburban to me. But obviously you're not going to get a building like a Scottish Rite or Casa Loma out in Overland Park, really. So what do you think about those? Yeah, the buildings were awesome, especially Scottish Rite. I mean, I was pretty blown away by like just that venue, and was kind of like, how did again, like it was another contrast to like, how are we wrestling in this place? Like this place is huge. You guys are actually like selling tickets to where it doesn't look super empty. Like it's, it was a pretty crazy experience. But I do remember after I got signed on full time, that's when we started trying to do like more shows and like in like Wichita or some of these other places. And I do remember some of those were like, yeah, we're back. We were still doing the big shows at like, Scottish Rite or whatever,
Sure.
but like those little
Topeka.
those little Topeka house shows and stuff we were doing were like, oof,
yeah,
boy.
yeah. Topeka was one of the worst, I think.
Well, that was just like a gym. Yeah, there wasn't much. It was that. That's all it was. I mean, compared to anything, Scottish Rite blows it away. But
definitely.
Yeah, so let's get to the eventual end here, Hoodie, because like there's been a lot of people very upset, and they've come around. Some of the people are very upset when this thing closed, but I had sort of gotten wind a few days before this actually happened, and I did obviously told Major asked me not to say anything, and at the time, like it was sort of a crapshoot to me. Like with Major, you never know. like you never know if this is going to come back. You don't know if it's going to be he'll change his mind in a few days or something happens, or if he's going to like maybe just say, hey, let's take a sabbatical and we're coming back or whatever. So when he had that call, Marty Bell, she infamously was flying home or what, flying away. She didn't. Yeah. She wasn't available, so she got to hear it like secondhand. But we had ramped up, got the TPC all ready for the new show. The Harlem Globetrotters finished the bathroom. Everything was ready to go. But then eventually, we get Major Basin comes in and says it's all over. Like, so going into that, I'm assuming you had a little bit of wondering why the hell we were sitting there, but also like, what were your reaction before and after that?
I've thought about this so much since it's closed. I think there was like an element of kind of all of us being in denial. I think like if you look back on it retrospectively, none of us had really talked to Major in a while. I remember there being like, he was like not around.
He was MIA for the majority of like 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah.
Right. For like a while. And we were all kind of like, what's going on with that? But then at the same time, none of us were really worried about it because we had just done all this work on the TPC. Like we were still moving. And like, most importantly, I think for all of us, especially the wrestlers, like we were still just doing great business. Like our attendance was crazy. Our ratings were crazy. The shows were getting better. Like everybody was just outperforming one another. So I think all of those elements kind of led to us being like, there's nothing to worry about. But I think if I could go back in time, I probably would have been a little bit more worried about the fact that we hadn't seen Major around in a while. I think that might have led some of us to think like, okay, like maybe this is it. And then, the day of, all I remember really is all of us being there. And anytime all of us were together, it was always just kind of like a big joke around hour. So I definitely remember the spirits being like high. And Chris, you're a pretty hard dude to read anyway. But I don't really remember what I didn't expect it to close that day. But when Major came in, I could tell that there was something wrong.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know how many times it's been talked about on your guys' show or whatever, but I remember him getting choked up and while he was telling us, and I remember being very like angry about the whole thing. But again, like retrospectively, I think about what it must have been like for him to tell us all that day. And the fact that he like chose to come in, he didn't choose to have you tell us, Chris. He didn't choose to, tell us over the phone. Like he chose to stand in front of us and like give us all, FaceTime, essentially, and tell us that, it was closing. And I remember him getting choked up. And I remember, I think about like how hard that must have been for him, not just as like the owner of the company, but just as a dude, like if you know Major, like imagining him getting like emotional is pretty tough. You
Sure.
know, it's pretty tough to think about. But he was emotional in that moment, and I could, you know, I couldn't see it at the time, and I'm sure we'll get into how pissed off I was. But retrospectively, you know, it was pretty big of him to come in and like tell us all that day.
Well, yeah, I mean, you bring up several things there. Like one thing is he was gone for a couple weeks, and yes, also in retrospectively looking, that was probably because Major does have a heart. Like he's actually a pretty nice, soft dude, but he has this exterior, and like sort of his business like side does not ever let anybody see you sweat. So that's sort of how he is. But when he wasn't around a little bit, I actually during that time had really no idea what was going on. But I had seen Major sort of behind the scenes more than you guys, and like he had that side of him. He just wasn't one to really show that in front of his entire staff. But let's talk about being angry, right? So
Yeah.
I understand, like, one reason why obviously I didn't want to say anything until it was actually 1000% real was because I had friends like you and Marty and people that have like moved their whole life over here and had a job, and like this is going to affect more than just bookings. This is obviously going to. I mean, we had Thor was married with kids, Jake Durden's married with kids. I mean, there's a lot of people's lives at stake here, and I know that's why Major felt horrible about it. And at the time, I don't blame anyone for being really upset. And but I know.
Was it all of us that moved, Goff? Or was it, I'm trying to think of the office staff.
Well, I mean, like the Regals obviously were here. Michael Strider was here. Lucy was here. Like, there was a lot of people.
But there was a good majority that had moved and uprooted their life.
Yeah, you had come from California. What's so funny looking back at it is how many people stayed in Kansas City. Now Dak's back. Dak is here. Hoodie's here. Gabe stayed. Marty was here for 5 years. It's like there's just a lot of people stayed here, but most were not from here. So of course, Hoodie, I didn't really want that is a major thing, that if he's going to say it to you guys, it has a lot of implications. So you can talk about being angry, and obviously this is something that you can look back in hindsight now and see from a different perspective, but at the time, don't blame me at all.
No, yeah. And I think that on the surface, like if you were to stick a microphone in my face the day of, like, of course, that's all stuff I would have brought up. Like, oh, I like moved here for this, and like, what am I supposed to do now, and all that stuff. But really at the core of like my anger, and I think at the core of everybody's anger that day, was just how much it sucked that we were losing what we were losing. Like it had nothing to do with, like, of course, like I'm going to figure my life out. Of course, everybody's going to land on their feet eventually. Like I think everybody probably had this attitude of like, well, we're screwed. Like I know like some of the wrestlers, like some of the boys like felt like that, like, oh great, like I'm out here by myself, like what am I supposed to do now? But I think really at the core of what we were all feeling was just like we all cared about the NWL so much, and we all felt like it was right there. Like we were so close to turning the corner. We were so close to like being something that I truly feel like could have been around to this day.
Agreed.
I just think it was just like that anger that I felt. And of course, like I'd have to, like you said, I was younger then. I had to put that on somebody. And of course, Major is going to be the guy that I placed that on. But in reality, man, like that dude gave me so much opportunity. He gave me like definitely 2 of the best years of my life. And I look back on those days with nothing but, just laughter and fun. As much as that day sucked, and as much as the subsequent like weeks sucked, like we were able to all kind of calm down and realize like, hey, like we just went through something pretty unique and special together, and it's given me lifelong friends, it's given me a career. And even from a wrestling perspective, we talked about before we went on the air, we talked about or maybe while we were on the air, I don't know, we talked about the Haku thing. Like I got closure from that. Like that was from doing the Metro show and wrestling Haku. Like that was closure for me. Being a kid in 2012 that was just coming to Metro shows with like stars in my eyes, watching Jeremy Wyatt and Michael Strider go at it, to like fast forwarding all these years and wrestling a freaking legend in, Metro Pro. Like, it was just such a full circle thing for me. And if I hadn't followed, just that dream of like coming to NWL and doing this full time, I never would have been able to do that. I never would have been able to work at Strange. I never would have been able to like meet my, wife. I wouldn't have anything that I have right now if I hadn't done the NWL. So that's pretty much it for me, man. Like, I loved my time there.
It's funny. That's sort of how Gabe's like that too. Gabe loves Kansas City now, and he stays here for some reason. He likes Kansas City over California.
Yeah,
love it.
NWL was a great time, man, and it's something that we can all always like get together and kind of like talk about the memories and stuff.
Oh,
and
yeah,
I'm stoked that you guys are doing this podcast, because it gives us all an opportunity to connect with each other that way.
No, it's fun. I mean, I could talk NWL all day with the two guys like you or whatever that know everything about it. Of course, it was such a cool pivotal moment in all of our lives. And like, I think about stuff. You slice it to death. Like, I think, at the end, you're right. I mean, people, and I've called out some people for saying like they're ridiculous ways that they think NWL went out of business, which never were true. It was doing better business and doing great television ratings and doing all this stuff correctly. It was a combination of Major had other business dealings, his personal life, things that we had put ourselves in a hole, but which he knew fully well that we were going to as a startup company, and he's done this multiple times, so that wasn't anything shocking to anybody. And we had turned a corner. We were in the black, and that was because we had cut a lot of stuff. We got rid of the downtown building. We got rid of a lot of like sort of high paid staff. We got more hybrid staff like you, Hoodie, and other people like that could do multiple jobs. All that stuff was working in our favor. Now, would you want it to be that way forever? It could have been, or we could have had the way it started, which was like extravagant, which was like something like, if you wanted it to work, would have probably never. If you wanted it to last forever, the way it started would have never been anywhere near what it would have been, right. And it's sort of weird to look at it that way because, Gabe, to be honest with you, you probably would have never been called to come here from California if we would have had like, let's do this really budget conscious. Let's bring in a guy from California. That's probably not going to happen. Right. Then all these people ended up living here. I don't know if it would have worked out any other way. Now, there was some stuff that we've talked about that were, where the venues were, how much the venues were, like how much some people were getting paid at the beginning. There's some stuff that I look back on and say like, what if? But at the end of the day, I don't know if any wrestling company outside of obviously WWE is meant to stay around for, decades and decades. It's sort of, I think it's sort of proven that that's not really the case, especially post territory days.
Yeah.
But anyway, as we wrap this up, I do agree with everything you said, Hoodie. It's like in our own figurative way, our own war battle that we all went together in, and we all got super close during that time. And even if I don't talk to you or the Regals or Dak or anybody for like years, I'll get a message from Maverick or somebody from out of the blue just bringing up like, you want me to call 911, stuff like that. And like, they'll just get some random text. And I'm like, that just brings it all back to like us in the back room at the TPC, telling jokes or whatever. So I miss it.
I do too, man. It was a blast. Maverick, actually, there was some drama. There's some drama in indie wrestling a couple months ago, maybe 3-4 months ago, and it involved me and another NWL person. And I remember Maverick saying like, hey man, like NWL, we all need to like stick together. We're all NWL guys. And I remember kind of like laughing at that and being like, you know what, he's right. Like we all do kind of have to have each other's back because we all went through the crazy shit together.
Yeah, that's funny. That's funny. Well, that's what it was, but yeah.
So,
wrap her up, Gabe.
So what?
Wrap her up, Gabe.
Oh, okay. But before we wrap up, I want to ask you guys both kind of a fun question. So during Goff is all about. We're all kind of story guys. We like stories in our wrestling, but part of stories is promos. So Hoodie, you're known as a great stick guy. You're still, even when I film you backstage at CSW, I'm like, holy crap, this guy is amazing on promos. Although he put water on my jacket this last Saturday night.
That wasn't me. That was me. I saw somebody else spill that. I swear on everything that wasn't me.
Okay.
That was the kid that wrestled the first match. Anyway, go ahead.
Really? That kid?
Yeah, straight up.
Okay. But anyways, if you had to pick one promo for somebody to watch, what promo would that be? And this is for both you and Goff.
Are you talking NWL or yeah?
No.
Ever.
Well, let's do both. Let's do one promo from personal NWL stuff and then one promo outside.
All right. I know what the NWL one is right off the bat, and it's not mine. And honestly, I could make a case that this would be my, like, of all of wrestling promo too.
Wow.
And I might be biased because I was in the room for it, but the Draper's Win promo,
oh dude,
is like one of my favorite promos
so
ever.
Good.
Because
so damn good.
Oh man, I could talk forever about this too, but like, if you know Dak and you know what he was going through in his life at that time,
dude,
and then you piece the story of just like the character of Dak Draper, that promo was just so excellent, so well done. It was perfectly produced, perfectly like done by Draper. It was just that's one of my favorite promos to this day. I love that promo. If
good choice.
If you go on YouTube, the NWL X or whatever, just type in Draper's Win. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I mean, that would be Dak had some really great promos. That was his best at NWL. I mean, Hoodie had great promos. Michael Strider had great promos with the foundation. They always had good stuff.
Yeah,
I enjoyed. I told you I enjoyed shooting all those vignettes, like sort of leading up into like the character introductions. When I went out on the street with the foundation and suits and stuff, they were so into that. The people that had the most passion obviously did the best promos. As far as like, man, there's a lot of great promos through time. None of them in NWA, Gabe. They're all WWF.
What about the Dusty promo? What about the famous?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I know. I'm joking. I'm joking.
Hard times.
But, gosh, I don't know. Like Flair had some great ones in WWF. His win after '92 was like, and that's all passion too. There's so many like Macho Man had some great promos. I mean, I don't know. Like I love the character promos, but like a Dak Draper Win promo, that kind of promo is always the best if you know a lot of what's going behind the scenes and how much truth it is in it. So you have a little bit better perspective when you're involved in it. So.
The Triple H, the one where he referred to himself as the Game the first time, I think is one of my favorite like Triple H promos.
Yeah,
where he's like sitting down with JR, and that was a good one too.
Hey Hoodie, weren't you in the building? God, there was a match you were in the building for. That was one of the greatest matches. What was that? Can you relive that real quick? It was
what match?
It was the match that you always talk about that you were in the building for. 80,000.
Oh yeah, WrestleMania 25, the Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels.
Oh yeah,
75,000 people suspended their disbelief to watch this wizard fight this guy, this holy man. It was one of the best matches ever, Chris.
It's second only to Bad Blood.
No, I'll tell you what, Chris, it was their best match ever. I love Bad Blood too, but man, that match was so good, dude.
Yeah, I brought that up for a reason because you guys used to always do that. It was so funny.
But what was the initial question? Like Shawn's best match? Was that the question, or was it Taker's best match?
I think it was. Yeah, I think it was Taker's best match.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And Mick Foley ruined freaking all those matches after Hell in the Cell. But Bad Blood, Hell in the Cell. To that point was the greatest match I'd ever seen. I was sitting front row for it. So, Hoodie hanging from the rafters with the 80,000. I was sitting there I had Shawn's blood on my shoes. So I'm taking the win on Bad Blood.
Yeah, you might be right. Hey, Hey, I don't know if they still have it, but if you guys are big wrestling nerds like me and you are throwing on Monday Night Raw and just kind of like binge watching it, when were you there, Chris? What were the years you were there? Somewhere between like
97 and 03 is when I was actually there, but I was on the writing team like 02, 03.
So while I was employed at NWL, I was just binge watching Monday Night Raw, and a commercial came up for a Super Soaker.
Oh yeah.
And there's big old country Chris Goff there getting sprayed by DX in a commercial for a Super Soaker.
Oh my God.
Dude, I was 18. I was 19. I just turned 19. That years old in that promo, and you want to talk about a little mark, okay? Well, a big little mark. Like when I went, they were shooting all those Super Soaker was there. That's when they still had those, like, you know, they had those tournaments with karate fighters, the karate fighter tournaments, you know, they had all these cool things with like these tie-in gimmicks, and Super Soaker was there, and they said they needed like a intern to like speak some lines in this promo with, it was the New Age Outlaws and X-Pac. And just the day of like hanging around them and helping them, I got so many stories just from being around them, but they let me say like a few lines about Super Soaker. As
don't act like you don't know the lines. You know the lines.
The Super Soaker 3000 is that? No, I didn't. Has 4 adjustable widths. No, but and then at the end, Billy Gunn's like, "Hey, big country," and he turns around and sprays me with the damn water machine, you know, the water gun. But yeah, it's so funny that the Regals and Hoodie would binge watch the network, and then they'd be like, "Hey, big country, I saw you backstage at SmackDown," and they'd pull me up. I had like another thing where I'm sitting front row in SmackDown, and I'm wearing a Rey Mysterio mask, which obviously I look just like Rey Mysterio with the mask on, and Kurt Angle and him were having that feud, and like Kurt pulls it off because he was like freaked out, and it's just me there, and like, I mean, the Regals always popped when they saw me on these stupid little 5-second cameos.
It's
on
awesome.
SmackDown, but
pretty funny.
That, you know, those probably brought me some brownie points with some of the boys, so they actually know I was not lying. Like most. Well,
not to mention you're like freakishly tall, and like you're like a well-built dude for a wrestling promoter too. Like,
well, I mean, I not all of us can be pedophiles and 400 pounds. I mean, but
holy,
I tried to. Well, there was one like that around these parts back in the day, so I'm actually talking from examples.
Yeah. Okay,
right.
All right.
Okay, Gabe. Like, yeah, like the West Coast over there is like clean. Give me.
Oh God, we're chock full of pedophiles. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
All right. Well, now that this conversation is fully derailed, Hoodie, is there anything you'd like to plug before we get out of here? And just thank you so much for your time, man. We appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, man. It was really awesome getting to talk to you guys. Just, you know, whatever, Twitter, Instagram. I don't really use either, but
right on.
Come check me out at CSW if you guys are, you know, into the NWL presentation. I think CSW does a pretty good job as far as you know, as close as you can get to it. So yeah, that's pretty much all I got.
How's your ankle doing?
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Sweet.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all so much, Chris. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, Hoodie's one of my favorites, and thanks for coming on, buddy.
Love you, bud. Appreciate you, man.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in to the worst territory in the world. Of course, we'll be back next week, the week after. All the stuff NWL, all stuff Central States Wrestling, Territory, Midwest, all that good stuff. We'll see you next time right here on the worst territory in the world. Bye-bye.
It's the worst territory in the world.